This episode is brought to you by Indeed. Stop waiting around for the perfect candidate. Instead, use Indeed sponsored jobs to find the right people with the right skills fast. It's a simple way to make sure your listing is the first candidates see. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs have 4 times more applicants than non-sponsored jobs. So go build your dream team today with Indeed. Get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
Every sip of Coca-Cola brings you closer to the excitement of the FIFA World Cup 26. Because nothing compares to the joy. So grab a Coke and drink in the FIFA World Cup 26. No purchase necessary. 13 plus in 50 U.S. states and D.C. with a web-enabled device. Ends March 1st with 8 entry periods. Rules at cokeurl.com/soccer rules.
Hello everyone, I'm Chris Wynn. Welcome to How We're the podcast, and you join us after we have managed to sleep on Sunderland's defeat to Liverpool via the only goal of the game. So it gives us another chance to reflect on a night where, according to the reaction of some fans, the performance wasn't up to scratch. But the two sides could only eventually be split on a goal from a set piece, which is reassuring when you consider where we've come from, and we remember the fact that we're taking on the champions who spent almost £500 million to strengthen during the summer. But it also means it's 4 defeats in 6 on paper. But I, for one, am still pretty relaxed about the rest of the season ahead, especially based on our last 2 performances. So to help me make sense of it all, we have a good friend of the podcast, someone who I remember all those years ago documenting Reedy's years when we were flying high in the Premier League, and is still a voice we hear now during every manager's press conference, because I'm very pleased to welcome the brilliant Simon O'Rourke. Hello, Simon.
Good morning. It's very nice to be here. It's a shame it's under the circumstances it is, but it is always very nice to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. It doesn't read well on paper, but we'll get into that. But yeah, how's things?
Yeah, not bad at all. I've just about dried out from last night. Terrible weather today as well. Isn't the weather great? But yeah, everything's fine. Thank you.
You want to try living on the edge of the Pennines like me? I'm getting ready to be snowed in over the weekend. But yeah, I mean, do you think? Just going very quickly into the kind of build up to the game. But do you think the weather added to it in terms of the atmosphere and that, because I built this up in the preview saying that it was under the lights, it was in front of the cameras, the rain was going to be there, and do you think it kind of managed to get up to those heights, if you like, of that big night at the stadium, like where, that the atmosphere was building up before kickoff?
I think a net neutral on that. So don't underestimate how bad the weather was. It was just miserable. It had been miserable all day. So there was a degree of misery you've got to factor in with the weather, because it was just horrible. It was a big game. It felt like a big game. Certainly in the media room, it felt like a big game because it was absolutely packed. There was more cameras than usual to film the post-match press conference. Basically, when one of the more established Premier League clubs comes to the stadium, you do notice the difference, just in terms of the media, in terms of the buzz about the place. I think it felt like a big game. I think possibly the atmosphere changed once the game started, I think. It was very big. I mean, as a slight aside, but relevant to last night, I love how they're building up home games now. I love the hype video. I love the way they've got the music going. So even on a bad night of weather, once the fans of sung wise men say, it's great. The place is cooking. So there was nothing wrong with the atmosphere, certainly at kickoff. As I say, then the match started.
Well, I mean, just before we get into the game, because obviously with TNT's coverage, it was interesting that before the game, they managed to get hold of Florent Ghisolfi, which I thought was quite interesting, because you haven't heard too much from him. You hear the odd bits and pieces. He's done the odd interview, but to do an interview like that was pretty strange. And I, for one, was kind of hanging off every word he was saying. But it was interesting to hear him say that, especially things like January was about continuity. It was just about trying to keep going as we were, rather than try and as some Sunderland fans maybe thought we would, and maybe try and get a couple of players in to kick on. But yeah, it was interesting that he said that. And the other thing was that you're talking about that build up to the game. He said the most important thing, and one of the first things he said to the players as well, is that it's important to be Sunderland and have that identity.
Yeah, that was one of the key lines, wasn't it? The key word was alignment and as one, which he was keen to stress, and which, in fairness, the club has put its money where its mouth is when it comes to LinkedIn buzzwords like alignment. They have been very aligned this season. It was interesting to see him talk. He's not been available to the wider media, but you can clearly see that he's a very important cog within the machine. And I'm actually all for people at that level of the football club coming out and actually saying some words and just sort of giving people a peek behind the curtain.
Well, I mean, talking about having a peek behind the curtain, I did mention that you're there at managers' press conferences. How is the atmosphere around the place? When you're kind of milling around, if you're talking to some people behind the scenes, I don't know whether you get to talk to a few players, but in the managers' press conference, do you feel that it's, as the season's gone on, obviously 36 points now, do you feel that the place has kind of relaxed a little bit as the season's gone on?
It's a good question. I think the natural, I don't know if pessimism's the word, but the natural guarded nature of Sunderland fans, especially after the next 10 years, means I don't think you describe it as entirely relaxed, but there is a kind of sort of almost bordering on euphoria a bit at how well generally it's gone, and just how ruthlessly competent the team that's been put on the pitch looks, and how there is a feeling of security that when these guys are out here, they are 9 times out of 10 not going to let the fans down. It's a very good feeling. I think probably the regulars within the press room, and the regulars to cover the club, and the staff within the press room, and the people you see, they all kind of sing from the Regis Labris hymn sheet of 40 points, 40 points, 40 points, 40 points. So nobody's been talking about Europe. Nobody's been talking about the Champions League. People have been talking about getting to 40 points. That's really, I would say, where it's at. I don't want that to sound negative, because it's not. It's anything but. People have been really, really enjoying it. But there's just that, well, hold on, let's not get ahead, of where the club is.
It was interesting because actually Ghisolfi hit on that exact point. He said, we're not talking about Europe at all. We're still looking at that 40 points. Then once we get the 40 points, we look at everything else. And you were talking about enjoying it and, talking about that unbeaten record at home before this. I mean, especially this week, it seemed to build up even more before this Liverpool game. Everybody listing the clubs that we were, in a group with across Europe, the Barcelonas, and there was many others now that I've completely forgotten because it doesn't matter anymore. But the fact that we were unbeaten at home, people were making a huge thing of it in this build-up. Do you think that almost got too big? Do you think in the end there was almost an emphasis on just not losing, and there was almost more pressure on us playing at home because of that record?
I don't think so, given the nature of the opposition. I think it was pretty obvious it was always going to be a certain sort of game last night, probably a game that was similar in nature to the Arsenal and Manchester City games that have already gone at the Stadium of Light. So I take your point entirely, but I think there might have been that let's not lose the home record, lads, feeling if it had been the Fulham game or the Brighton game. But because it was the Liverpool game, I think the game was always going to go a certain way. Sunderland were always going to have to play a certain way. So I don't think that was probably at the forefront of their minds.
Yeah. Well, again, just on that unbeaten record at home, and tying in with the atmosphere and the fans, and even kind of the players, even maybe in the approach to the game, when we get into the game. But where was the expectation? Because it seems like if you look at the games earlier on in the season, there was an element of the fans almost thinking, right, well, we know we need to be the 12th man here. We know we need to be behind the team from the off. But do you think that kind of dynamic changes as expectation changes, where almost now that the players are expected to do something to get the fans up, and that dynamic's changed slightly?
The dynamics undoubtedly changed a little bit. It's the whole, one of the great difficulties of high-level football is that everybody, players, clubs, head coaches, inevitably you become victims of your own success. And Sunderland on a small scale have this season because, well, I mean, how 48,000 will remember going there for the West Ham game as I did on the first day of the season and really not knowing what to expect.
Mm.
And then that happens, and then subsequent Brentford happens, and then it just gets better and better and better or so. And it's almost like Christmas has come early a lot of the time. But then as it gradually goes on, expectation does just inevitably kind of rise. And there is that feeling that, well, it is a fortress. They aren't going to get beaten.
Mm.
You need to entertain me because I come here now expecting to see this team that's unbeaten. There is a bit of that, but I don't think it's in any way toxic or was in any way toxic or anything like that at all. I still think the fans have been brilliant at the Stadium of Light this season. Yes, the expectation had gone up, but again, I think the expectation level was at a reasonable place going into last night's game because of who the opposition were. Because it's just always going to be a difficult game.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, let's go into Regis Lebrice's side because I don't know if the change that he made in terms of Talby coming out and Angulo coming in was a surprise to you because obviously he was straight on the bench for that Arsenal game. But I felt that I was so proud after that performance at Arsenal. And of course, Talby was part of that and played a big part in that, especially that first hour where we were fantastic. Were you surprised that Angulo came in?
Yeah, I was. He's not been there long. I don't think. I mean, he did his first interview for the club not in English, so you guess that language is an issue. Coming to a new country is an issue. Sunderland system under Regis Lebrice is obviously quite dense in terms of how they attack and probably particularly how they defend as well. There's a lot of instruction for him to take on. So there's a big show of confidence in him to start him. I actually don't mind the big show of confidence. It's fine. He struggled to get into the game in the first half. I think he somebody said in the press box he sort of played his way into the game, which I think is kind of fair enough. Because he ended up not looking out of play. So he was perhaps on the pitch maybe 15 minutes longer than I thought he might be. But whilst I was surprised that he was picked to start, I don't know. In some respects, it felt quite Sunderland, if you know what I mean. This is what we do. We get the new people. We trust the new people. We are as one. This is what we're going to put on the pitch for you. He's part of it now, so let's go. So I was okay with it. It's not something that I was going to lose sleep over.
Yeah. Well, I mean, getting into the start of the game, because actually first couple of minutes I thought we started really well. I was thinking, right, we're bang up for this. Here we go. But then Liverpool kind of started to show their class after just a few minutes. Really kind of put their foot on the ball, showed their dominance in the game. After about 30 minutes, I wrote down that they had 75% of possession. But it did seem like it was, and again, I think that the unbeaten record had built up in the week before. And I think Liverpool made a big play on having that tactic to say, right, let's quieten this lot down. Don't let them put the big tackles in. Keep the ball, keep possession of the ball. And like I said, 75% possession in the first 13 minutes. I think it was a clear tactic from Liverpool to do that.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that should partly be taken as a compliment for Sunderland, for Regis Lebrice and the coaching staff, for the players, for the unbeaten record, for the atmosphere at the Stadium of Light. I think you're exactly right. I think they've done an awful lot of homework about how Sunderland play, how Sunderland like to recycle the ball. And I think they try deliberately to knock them out of those patterns. And there's the unspoken truth that thankfully Sunderland fans haven't had to come up against too much this season, which is sometimes the team you're playing is just better and the players within the team you're playing are just better. And such was the case last night. They only won 1-0, as we've said, and we'll get into it, from set piece. But I thought that was an exceptional away performance from Liverpool. They were really good. They had hard work, they had graft, they had shape. Within tight areas, they were brilliant. I mean, I won't be the only person who sort of fell in love with Florian Wirtz last night just because what joy. He's just like this little ghost who flicks in and out of spaces and just flicks a ball around a corner. And they were just very good. But to just go back to the original point, I think they were very good in such a way that they had planned to try and make life difficult for Sunderland at home.
Definitely finding his feet in the Premier League. He was. I mean, I preferred he was playing against someone else, but he was good to watch. as an opposition player. But yeah, I mean, again, going back to that build-up and the unbeaten run at home, a lot of the emphasis was on Sunderland, especially Sunderland fans. We were thinking, oh, great, we've got Liverpool. This is going to be a big night at the stadium, like almost a famous victory against Liverpool we can get here. I was thinking myself we would maybe nick a draw later on. But do you think a lot of people, and I probably include myself in this, forgot just how good Liverpool were?
Maybe that goes back to the expectation point that you made a couple of minutes ago, how expectations have just subtly and almost imperceptibly risen to the point where you're saying, well, I fancy us to get something out of Liverpool tonight, you know, what the fans would be saying on the way into the ground. And yeah, that's the danger of rising expectations, because I mean, I think certainly this season, when Sunderland approach a game against a team like Liverpool, you need to be thinking in terms of anything from this game is an absolute bonus, and it's going to take everything to get anything from this game. These teams are just good. These are teams that are always forever in the Premier League and always earning loads of money. And as you've said, $500 million on new players after winning the title. As marvellous as Sunderland have been this season, that's a completely different world.
But, you know, going into the performance, because a lot of people have knocked Sunderland's performance, but if I look at that first half, and Liverpool were completely dominant, and I think on their day, you could probably put Liverpool in the top 5 teams in Europe on their day. I mean, their issue clearly has been that they haven't been consistent enough. But I think on their day, they're one of the top sides in Europe. And if you look at that first half, even though they were completely dominant, we really restricted them. I think there was a couple of chances from Wirtz on the half hour, one where a long-range shot and the other one where he hit the post. But otherwise, Liverpool struggled to break us down. And I think when people are analysing the performance and saying, oh, well, we didn't do enough going forward, we've got to remember how good Liverpool were and the fact that we restricted them to just those couple of chances in that first half.
Yeah, it's been a feature of the season, hasn't it? The desire to defend. Like a real desire, not just, oh, right, lads, it's time to defend, everybody get into position. These guys seem to actively enjoy and take pride in it. And they did again last night. And I mean, it was proper 100% effort in that first half to keep them out. It really was. I think you make a very good point as well, that despite Liverpool's territorial dominance and clear dominance in terms of on the ball technique, Sunderland limited them. There was 3 major chances in the first half, and given the dominance Liverpool had, Sunderland could have gone under in that period. Had Liverpool been 3 up at half time, nobody could have complained about it. Sunderland worked so hard, and it's been a feature of this. It's been a feature of every point they've won this season, is how hard they've worked. And they exhibited all of that again last night, despite the fact the home record ultimately went.
There was some criticism that maybe in that first half we dropped too deep. But sometimes is that not based on what the opposition's doing? Obviously, in an ideal world, you wouldn't want to do it. But sometimes you have to just set your stall out and dig your trenches almost if a team's pinning you in like that.
Yes. Again, I just give Liverpool all the credit that's going, because they were very good last night. So I agree with that point you made there. Also, isn't that kind of the way Sunderland play this season? They're not a team who desperately needs to have the ball all the time. I think they've become quite comfortable playing deep and then springing out low block, as Mr. Labrie says. And that wasn't a good accent. If I could have that time again, I'd do it better. But no, I just think in a sense that's almost been one of Sunderland's ways of living, hasn't it? They have defended deep. So I think they were pushed back by a good Liverpool performance. I don't think it was wildly different to a lot of other performances. A lot of the Man City game at home, which was brilliant on New Year's Day, followed a similar sort of territorial pattern.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just they didn't get the breakthrough. But one thing I did want to talk about, is, well, just in that first half, but it was generally throughout the game, the battle between Brian Brobby and Canate at the back. I mean, that was a throwback properly. I mean, we're talking about Reedy's days in the introduction. I mean, he would have loved his striker to have having a battle with the centre half like that. But, you know, that battle went on, and there was a couple of times, there was once in the first half where I think Sunderland fans was screaming for a free kick, and then when you saw the replay, Brian Brobby had hold of Canate's shirt and was dragging him along with him, basically. But there was a penalty shout towards the end of the first half. It was like right in injury time where I think it went to VAR. But do you think sometimes, because Brian Brobby's always got hold of the defender's shirt, sometimes when you think he might get a decision, there's almost an instinct from the referee to say, no, well, he's always at it.
Oh, 100%. I mean, players' reputations precede them always. And Brian Brobby it comes on the pitch and he's ready to throw down with the centre back every game, isn't he? So, yeah, I do. Obviously, I was in the press box. We've got replays in the press box. I saw the replays of that penalty incident. I don't know. I mean, I wonder what would have happened if the incident had happened 3 minutes earlier, and the referee hasn't got the excuse of just blowing the halftime whistle literally 4 seconds after it. I don't know. I'm not sure it sort of met the level it was going to need to get to a penalty, but it did just sort of feel a convenient moment for the referee to go, right, that's it, lads, half time.
Well, before we get into the disappointment of the goal, I think we'll stop for a quick break and we'll be back very soon. And welcome back to How We're the podcast, and we're just about to get to the goal. But just first, actually, just on that, the Brobby Canate scrap, if you like. I don't know if you noticed it, because obviously it was on the coverage, but there was a camera in the tunnel at half-time, and it appeared that Regis Lebris was having a long conversation with the referee, and Brian Brobby just so happened to walk past at the time, and Regis Lebris was pointing at him. But clearly the management and the staff were saying that they thought he was getting the rough end of the decisions and maybe he should have gotten more from the referee. I mean, I don't know if you heard any of that or got any impressions of that?
Not really. I think that's fair enough. I'm quite glad to see Regis Lebris doing that because, believe me, most managers do that. Whether it's the manager or another member, head coach, another member of the coaching staff, almost every single game, you'll see somebody trying to get in the referee's ear at half time. That's just the way it works.
Well, never mind in the tunnel. Arteta tries to come on the pitch during the game and speak of the referee's ear, doesn't he? But yeah, getting into that second half. And again, I think, it's interesting when you've had time to sleep on it. But again, reading some of the criticism about the performance in general, about not being positive enough, you look at the start of that second half, the first 5 minutes, we had 70% of the possession. We had a couple of half chances. There was Hume's shot just over the bar. And then Michele dragged a shot wide when we pressed them and won the ball back in their half. But I thought it was, considering we'd gone through that first half, to come out in the second half and do that, I mean, it showed a lot of bravery, didn't it?
Yeah, they did. They started brightly in the second half. Attacking wise, it always felt that they were a bit reluctant to commit resources forward, and it did in that early stage of the second half as well. But yeah, they started brightly. They are brave, and why shouldn't they be brave when they were 12 Premier League games unbeaten at home? And you think, well, half-time has taken the sting out of the game. Here's our opportunity to reset the balance of the match, and so they gave it a good go. Absolutely, it's just a failure of failure is a bit strong a word, but I suppose it was a failure on the night. A failure in that period and a failure in the match was the failure to actually create a clear-cut chance, because that was the problem. That's probably been, if you're going to criticise anything, that's probably been the wider problem throughout the season. But last night against a high-quality team, they couldn't create that one huge chance. I mean, yeah, they did. It was just difficult for them.
Yeah, and on the subject of bravery, about 5 minutes into the second half, there was a bit of a clash between Ekitike and Roofs, where Ekitike kind of kept his arm in, and Roofs, I don't know whether he was claiming that it went in his eye or something like that, but kind of flung himself to the ground. And it was almost a bit, when I saw it back, I winced a little bit, I have to admit, when I saw the replay, because at first I was going, he could be sent off here. And when I saw the replay, I thought, But you've seen red cards given for less than that when people raise their hands.
He raised his hand, or at least he left his hand there, didn't he? So I suppose you're taking a risk. It was, I think, garden variety housery on all sides.
Yeah, absolutely. It could have went another way, but yeah, the goal did come on the hour mark, and again, I said this on the reaction pod, that I had two big frustrations with this. The first, that it came at a time when I was most comfortable. I literally wrote a note seconds before the goal that said, we're looking really comfortable at the minute and we can get something, we can potentially win this game. But the goal came from a corner, which is the other frustrating thing, that Dan Ballard was winning them all night. He was fantastic. You could see actually Liverpool had a tactic of putting men on Dan Ballard so he couldn't win the ball as well. They've clearly worked that out, that Dan Ballard was our best defender on that front. But the ball would landed pretty much right in the 6-yard box, right on top of roofs, under the bar. Van Dijk header, and Diarra couldn't do anything about it. But it's just frustrating when a goal's so simple like that.
Yeah. I thought Liverpool were actually quite dangerous from corners all night. They had a lot of them. They're not exactly Arsenal. They're not sort of, they're not going to be doing murals on walls for their set piece coach, I don't think. But they were quite dangerous. It's fairly simple stuff. In the first half, they were absolutely flooding the 6-yard box and making life difficult for the goalkeeper. In the second half, I think they changed slightly and they spaced it out a bit. But obviously, I think your point's exactly right about targeting Ballard, obviously, to sort of remove him from the play. And ultimately, when they go back over the video highlights of this game in the training ground, there'll be some finger pointing because Liverpool's best header of a ball got a free header in the 6-yard box. So something somewhere went wrong. Ultimately, it was a well-worked corner, but you felt, hold on, how's Virgil van Dijk got a free header? And it was basically a free header. So something went wrong and they got to live with that.
Yeah. Well, talking about Liverpool's stats, it was the third goal that Liverpool have scored from corners this season. So they're not exactly prolific in that sense. And actually, I did notice when we were defending, I don't know if you noticed this, but actually we put Ronaldo to man mark Van Dijk all night because the Ballard and Alderete are just free roaming just to win the ball. They don't mark anybody. But I haven't actually seen it back, so it'll be interesting to see if Ronaldo did kind of lose Van Dijk. Well, obviously he did because he won the ball, but just in terms of that period where, like I was saying, we were so comfortable, Simon, do you think, a lot of people have been criticising Sunderland's performance? Is it easy to forget that actually, even though we weren't creating all those chances, we did look comfortable. We got back to a point where we looked comfortable in the game. And in the end, it might have made us slightly vulnerable, but we were going toe to toe with Liverpool at that point.
Yes. It's been one of the features of the season, and they were good at it again last night. Their movement of the ball and their patterns with the ball and their triangles with the ball and just the way they keep possession and they can take the sting out of a situation and create time and space for themselves and remove a bit of risk for 20 seconds. They're very good at that. They've been very good at it all season. Yes, they miss Granit Xhaka. I mean, that's just obvious. And I don't think that's going to come as a galloping shock to anyone that gets said. But any team is going to miss their most important and best player. But they do the sort of structure with the ball that Sunderland have has been one of their strengths all season. I think ultimately that comes down to some very good coaching. And yeah, you're right. You can say now against anyone, they've been able to do that. They've been able to hold their own possession wise and do okay and just look incredibly competent. And that sounds like damning with faint praise, but so many teams come up from the Championship to the Premier League and just look incompetent. That actually looking competent is a big thing. And they did that again last night, again without actually being able to take it further up the pitch.
Yeah. Well, again, looking at the stats, it was the 6th time this season that we've gone behind in 13 home games. How do we view that? Do we view that as, that we don't take control of games, or do we view that we're brilliant at getting back into games, or both? I mean, how do we look at a stat like that? Because if you go behind in half of your home games, you don't exactly give yourself an advantage, do you?
No, but I wouldn't be looking too deeply into that. I would be looking at a promoted team coming up from the Championship to the Premier League. It's going to be harder. And I would look at the positives and I would look at till the end. Because the indefatigable spirit, which has defined the season of, no, today we're not losing. Today is a game that can be won. I know your point, but I think it's been so good. I think it just comes with the territory sometimes. This is harder. Do you remember Brentford earlier in the season, who were look good, and they're like they go a goal up, and they're a goal up with about 15 minutes to go, and you think, well, that'll probably be that then, and suddenly win the game. I'd almost look at it as a positive. Fine, pick aside that stuff in the summer, but for this season, I would look at it as a positive. There's always been ways to come back. There's always been faith that something will happen.
Yeah, it's as Ghisolfi says, it's always fine margins, isn't it? But yeah, we'll get into the closing stages of the game. You mentioned the substitution because you made a triple substitution with about 10 minutes to go, and one of those to come off was Angulo. Full debut. What did you make of it? Because I thought he was really positive. I thought every time, as you said, you grew into the game, but I thought he was really positive when he got the ball. And there was a couple of occasions where he showed just a flash of maybe what we can maybe look forward to.
Very much. I think you said it just right there. We said I think he played himself into the game. There looks like there's some good footwork in there, doesn't there? I thought overall he was a little bit inhibited, by which I mean, I think especially in the first half, to me, he looked like he was almost second guessing himself, thinking, am I in the right position? Is this where Ghisolfi has told me to be at this point? And I think there was a bit of that in him. Now, that will obviously work itself out over the course of time. Given that Liverpool were on about their 9th choice right back, I would have liked to see him just have a pop at the right back a little bit more. But I appreciate within the structure of the game that often just the chance didn't really come that often. But there was a bit early in the second half, wasn't there, where he did a nice spin and got a cross in and basically sat his defender down. So you think it's promising, isn't it? Certainly.
Yeah, well, not everyone makes their debut against Liverpool in the Premier League or full debut. But yeah, going into those, because like I said, it was half an hour we had after we conceded the goal, and actually maybe a bit longer because there was that bad injury to Endo, I think it was, who took a lot of time up, which meant there was a lot of stoppage time. But half an hour, and again, I thought we huffed and puffed, and I thought you could see the intent from the players, you could see the effort from the players. But again, was it just that lack of quality? Were Liverpool just too good defending, or did we run out of ideas? What do you think? How do you sum up that last half hour after we went behind?
It was the frustrating thing. I think everything you said plays into it. I think that there was a bit of a lack of quality to break down a quality defence. I thought Van Dijk had one of his imperious games, and I thought that it flowed through him. To me, Liverpool just looked so comfortable in that last period, and that was frustrating that Sunderland could not make them uncomfortable. There was a particular moment I remember. It was a lot of crosses came in from the right-hand side during the last few minutes and the long stoppage time. And there was a point where it wasn't a good cross came in, but I noted in stoppage time with the home record on the line, Brian Brobby was the only player in the penalty area. And I think Sunderland ran out of a few things last night, ran out of a bit of quality. I think they ran out of a bit of ambition. And I don't know, I think when you consider it was Arsenal at the weekend and it was Liverpool last night, I think that's probably a mentally tiring week for the players of Sunderland as well. And you've done 180 minutes and you're in the last knockings last night. You're probably just a bit mentally tired of sort of dizzy from Wirtz flicking the ball around the corner and what Arsenal were doing at the weekend. And it just felt like the tank was empty for the last 10 minutes last night because we've all seen a bit more charge of the light brigade type stuff in the last 10 minutes. And it just, for whatever reason, I think it's a combination of all of them. It just wasn't really there last night.
Yeah. But the one other small thing I just wanted to mention, purely because it seemed to get a lot of attention, because one of the other substitutions, of course, was Romain Mundle came on to replace Angulo because Talby came on to replace Trey Hume. There was a lot of questions asked, a lot of maybe criticism, because Mundell, I thought, got into a couple of good positions. And I think we've seen recently that the fact he's got to chop back inside when he's on that left-hand side, that, he does seem to be a little bit predictable when defenders realise he's going to do it every time. And it was interesting that I thought when they came on, I originally thought Talby would go on the left and Mundell would go on the right. And I would have preferred that. And I just think it might be interesting to see Mundell on the right-hand side to give him a little bit more of, it almost open his eyes up instead of, because I think now he's so naturally wanting to come inside. He ends up doing it so much that I think putting him on the right might give him that chance to go down the line.
Interesting point. All I would say is it seems to be Reggie Labrice's stylistic preference to have innie-outie wingers. And it's to be everyone's preference. that seems to be the way that top level, top flight football is played at the moment. It just seems to be your left footers play on the right and your right footers play on the left, and that just seems to be the way of it at the moment. And also, I mean, obviously I'm old enough that I love the idea of flying wingers on their correct foot, getting the crossing and the crushing header from the centre forward or the runner from midfield. But if there's one forward and not a lot of runners from midfield in the box, then is it entirely the best use of your time looking to get to the byline and pull the ball back? I think it's just a stylistic thing with that. I take people's criticism of it, and I think it would be an interesting stylistic wrinkle to put in there and try that for 10 or 15 minutes. And maybe last night would have been a good night to do it. Because I think Liverpool have had problems with balls over the top. And I sort of wondered if there might have been a call for a bit of old-fashioned 4-4-2. But obviously before Isidore came on right at the death.
Tell you what, Simon, it's coming up to Valentine's Day and you're talking about these romantic notions of 4-4-2 and crosses and bullet headers into the box. Absolutely loving it. But yeah, I mean, look, getting into the form I mentioned in the introduction, it kind of doesn't feel like it in some ways, but 4 defeats in the last 6. I mean, I'm not overly worried. I mean, but I'm seeing some comments from some people who say that they're concerned about the form. I'm looking at the performances, especially the last 3. I'm perfectly comfortable with the performance against Liverpool. I was proud of the lads at Arsenal, played Burnley off the park. Even though we can say that on paper, I don't think we should worry about that form.
I think the worry comes slightly from elsewhere. I agree with you. And I actually always thought that there would be patches like this for Sunderland this season. As good and as above expectation as it's been, I always thought they'd probably run into just rough stages where they took a few defeats on board. I'm not overly worried about it. To me, it's a season that's got one job, and they're with 12 games to go, they are 90% down the line with I mean, probably more than 90%. I mean, you look at the statistics, and I think the statistics are still up at about 98, 99% that Sunderland are going to stay up. I think this is the season that you roll with the punches if it comes to 4 defeats in 6, and you just look at the league table at the end and hopefully say, oh, well, that was fine.
Yeah, well, I saw there was a 2% chance of Spurs being relegated before Thomas Frank got the boot, so that was an interesting one. But yeah, I mean, again, there's 36 points and all those games to play, especially if you look at the points, touchwood and all of that we may pick up in the next few games looking at the fixture list in the Premier League. But there has been a few comments that people have said we should be looking over our shoulder and it's possible to get dragged back into the dogfight at the bottom. And I feel that's absolutely ridiculous. But I mean, should we give those comments any credit and be worried at all about that?
I think the natural reserve, the natural boy that cried wolf, the last 10 years of Sunderland means I think Sunderland fans are entitled to think that, to sort of expect the worst. I'll be a lot happier when they've got 40 points and then they keep going and they get more than 40 points, and I think they will do that. So I'm not especially sat here worried about that. But the teams at the bottom, it's not like last season in the Premier League where the teams at the bottom were DOA at this point. It was done. Everything was completely done. It was absolutely obvious what was going to happen. Basically, the doctors have checked and they've found a pulse in one or two of them down the bottom. And I think that is the issue at the moment. There's still a really healthy gap, but I think the thing when people worry about this, I don't think they look at it from all angles, because it would take a statistical miracle for Sunderland to go down from this position, because what you're banking on, like, about 8 things happening. You're banking on Sunderland pretty much not picking up another point this season. I don't think that is going to be the case. But you're also banking on West Ham, Nottingham Forest, Crystal Palace, Dr. Tottenham, all suddenly reeling off 5 wins on the spin, which, when they probably play each other, and so it's probably statistically not possible for that to happen. And it seems extremely unlikely, but I completely understand Sunderland fans having that attitude.
Yeah. Well, is it almost, and do you think that the psychology of the thing, of the position that we're in within the club, and maybe that the management have to try and, deal with this side of things, that it's almost like the cricketer being on 99, that you're on 36 points, you need to get to 40, and there's all that pressure that you just need to bridge that small gap. You need that when you get close to that number, it almost gets further away. That is there an element of that going on?
I think that's a really good analogy. I like that. I hadn't heard that before. I hope you're wrong, but I could see absolutely how that could be right. I mean, let's see how it plays out over the next 4 or 5 games. I mean, looking at them, it's an interesting slate, the next few games, because I think you could say the next 5 games are all games that could go either way with Sunderland. So let's see where their heads are at. I think they've been a mentally strong team all season, so I would hope that it's not a problem. And I think fans agonize about this stuff far more than football players and coaching staffs do. And Sunderland's coaching staff can analyze the last week and say, Arsenal and Liverpool, the next 5 teams they're going to play are nowhere near as good as that. The games will be different. More chances will be available to be created. I would hope it's going to be all right, but I like your 99 analogy. I think that's an interesting one.
Yeah, I've just got a feeling that once we get to that 40 points, the shoulders are going to relax a bit with the players, and we're actually going to maybe take the shackles off and be a bit more positive.
Where that points, and yeah.
Yeah, we'll see. But anyway, just going into the weekend quickly, because obviously it's a break from the focus of the Premier League, and we move on to the FA Cup against Oxford United. Do you think this is a good thing for the club? We said that 4 defeats in 6. Do you think it's good for the squad and the management to say, just to forget about the Premier League for a weekend?
Yeah, I do. I think it's brilliant. I think it's quite good timing. It's obviously, Valentine's Day, football romance. It's a magic of the cup game, isn't it? It's a potential banana skin. Oxford down in the relegation zone in the Championship. It's a game Sunderland should win, but it's away from home. So I think it's an interesting cup. So I think it is good timing. Just after the mentally and physically and tactically tough week they've had, I think it's very good timing. I'll be interested to see what team he plays. One of my biggest surprises of the season was the team he put out at Everton in the third round. I really wasn't expecting that at all. And I was at the press conference before that, and he's got, the professor has an interesting way of talking. And he said before that, we have to think carefully about the FA Cup because it could structurally be important within our season later on. And I thought that was an interesting way of putting it. But I took that to mean that he thought it might be a good thing for us to have this distraction and this opportunity a little further down the line. So, I mean, why wouldn't they go and try and win the game on Sunday? You never know. They do that. They get hopefully a home draw in the 5th round, and then you just don't know, do you?
Yeah. Well, I mean, against Everton, there was the element of it being another Premier League club, so it kind of made sense that he would play the strongest side to try and get through to the next round as well. We had a week off. But even though you've got a week off after this, where we haven't, it's weekend to weekend until we play Fulham in the next game after this. But because it's Oxford, do you think that will tempt them into maybe giving a few players a run out?
Yeah, I think probably one or two. For example, I think Brobby might be due a little rest. I don't think he'll change too much, though. Um, I'm usually bad at second guessing Regis Lebris's team selection, so everything I say will probably be wrong. But you think it might be a chance to get Angulo more minutes. Having said that, he'll now play Tolby. But you know, uh, I think we'll probably see a few changes, but I think that's okay as long as they get through. Basically, that's always the bottom line, isn't it? Oh, he made 5 changes. Did they win the game? Yeah. Well, what are you worried about then? Yeah.
Well, I was going to ask you about if you've got any memories of this, because, of course, the last time we played Oxford United in the 4th round of the FA Cup was, of course, 1992. And we got to the final that year. And I'm clinging on to any straw that I can grasp at the minute. But yeah, and that one was a strange one, because we were 2-0 up, I think, within about half an hour, 3-0 up around the hour mark. And then West Ham scored 2 last-minute goals to make it nervy at the end. But it was a good one, that.
Well, you say memories of it. Just, I was actually there. I was actually at the match, at the old Manor Ground. So yeah, I remember it well. It was very strange, and John Byrne was everyone's hero at the time, and yeah, it was that was a strange old game. Yeah,
Because I was listening to that one on the radio. I remember at home, getting nervous at the end when I thought we might go out, but but it was a good one, that. But the other thing was,
I was not living in the northeast at the time. I was living elsewhere, so it was quite close by.
Yeah. Well, the other good one about this, and it was another February game at Oxford, again at the Manor Ground, which had about 17 different stands, didn't it? It was ridiculous, all the little bits that it had. But another good quiz question is, what was the first ever pay-per-view game in the UK? I don't know if you remember that one.
I remember that one as well. It was a dreadful 0-0 draw, wasn't it?
It was the worst game of football you've ever seen.
Yeah.
I remember in Sunderland, people piling around people's houses paying a tenner for it, and it was the worst game of football you've ever seen.
I remember covering that. I wasn't at that game, but I can't remember whether I actually got to see it because of the early pay-per-view mechanism. But yeah, it was awful.
Yeah, absolutely. It was about the only really bad game that season, because we blew everyone else away, I think. It was in that title-winning season with Peter Reid. We blew everyone else away. The one people had to pay a tenner for, we drew 0-0, and there wasn't a shot on target, I don't think. But yeah, just about this Oxford game, how much emphasis do you think we'll place on the FA Cup? Because, do you think that the Premier League season might just fizzle out if we start getting an FA Cup run? Do you think one might distract from the other? Because I remember that one in 92, we couldn't win a league game, but we were beating everybody in the FA Cup.
History tells you it's always a danger. I just don't see it this season. I just think everyone, let's go back to Ghisolfi's chat at the beginning, one club, one Sunderland. I think everyone's focused. Xhaka will be back in 2 or 3 weeks' time. He'll whip them into shape on the pitch. If they get through Oxford and they let's say they get an insanely winnable tie at home in the 5th round and win that, I just think everyone's on a mission this year at Sunderland. I don't see people downing tools with 6 games to go in the Premier League because they're basically safe and there's a 6th round FA Cup tie to look forward to. I think they're too on point this season.
Yeah. There you go. What a place to end it. Sunderland safely through the quarterfinals already. We've booked our place there. But just leaves me to say thank you very much, Simon. Really appreciate your time, mate. It was brilliant.
Oh, thanks. Enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thanks again. And thanks again, everyone, for listening. Don't forget, we'll have loads more analysis on the Roke Report website, and we'll have pods every day as always. And hopefully we'll be getting a little bit more cup fever beyond this weekend if Simon's correct. So look out for all of that. But from us, it's bye for now.